No? There? Good evening, Council. Good evening, visitors, and good evening, staff, and those who may be watching on live stream this evening. I ask you to, Council, to join me in our town commitment on this Wednesday, February 13th. We are grateful for the many gifts which have been bestowed on Penetanguishene and its citizens, including the gifts of freedom, opportunity, and peace that we enjoy. May we be worthy custodians of all that has been entrusted to us. We ask that all in attendance and those who could not be here assist us in promoting good government. May our decisions as members of Council be enlightened, and may we all be strengthened in our awareness of our duties and responsibilities. May we be granted the wisdom, knowledge, will, and understanding to preserve the good fortune of the town for the benefit of all and to make good laws and wise decisions. Thank you all. We start with the approval of the agenda, and I have moved by Councillor Vaudemont-Kerr and seconded by Councillor Cummings that the agenda of the regular council meeting of February 13, 2019 be approved as presented. All in favor? Carried. If anyone has any declaration of pecuniary interest, it is now time, or at another date. We will move on to deputations and presentations, and we have with us this evening Carol Lambie, the CEO of Waypoint. And Carol, welcome.
Thank you very much, Mayor LaRue and members of Council, for the opportunity to present to you this evening an update on some of the activities at Waypoint Centre for Mental Health Care. So first of all, before I start speaking about Waypoint, maybe a little bit about why we're needed. And if I were to sum it up in one word, it would be prevalence. And you probably have all heard the statistic that 1 in 5 Canadians, or 20% of Canadians, experience a mental health problem or illness. And that is more than double the number of people living with diabetes and more than 1.5 times the impact of all cancers. Another unfortunate statistic is that 70% of mental health problems have their onset during childhood and adolescence. And so as we talk about the programs and we talk about the system of mental health care, early intervention is extremely important. There's also a significant economic impact. There are about 500,000 people estimated not to be at work in any given week due to a mental illness. The estimated cost on an annual basis is $51 billion a year. And just earlier this week, I think the Children's Mental Health Organization of Ontario was talking about the impact on parents having to remain at home and not be able to work, supporting children with mental illness. One of the other words we use a lot is stigma. We like to use this quote from the actress Glenn Close, talking about our unease with people who are suffering from mental illness. Just under half of Canadians said they would socialize with a friend who was suffering from a serious mental illness. Only, or a quarter of Canadians are fearful of being around people who suffer from a mental illness. Only a third of people who seek mental health services actually receive them. So first of all, we have stigma preventing people from reaching out to receive care that they need. And then those who do reach out, either because of stigma or because of lack of resources, are not able to get the care that they need. And we would never hear statistics like that, again, related to some physical health issue like cancer or diabetes. This unwillingness to talk about mental health and discomfort with those types of conversations leads to a lot of myths and misconceptions, and there's just a few of them on there. You can read them for yourself. So that's why Waypoint is needed, to provide care for people experiencing mental health challenges. And it has been around for a long time, and a lot of you have probably heard most of this presentation. Started out in 1859 as a boys' reformatory, and I think one of the interesting stories for me is that the boys actually built the reformatory after the first one burnt, and it is currently the administration building on our Waypoint campus. It became a hospital in 1904 and was originally called the Asylum for the Insane. And so we talk about stigma, and today, in today's language, often think of asylum with negative connotations, but actually it was a place of refuge. So many across the province were actually called asylums. And you can see the history and the changes, certainly the changes in the buildings on the campus, but lots of changes in terms of the way mental illness is perceived and treated. So a little bit about Waypoint today. It became a public hospital in December 2008, and there were 10 provincial psychiatric hospitals across the province. And as the Health System Restructuring Commission went across the province, one of the recommendations was that the government not actually directly operate hospitals. And so gradually, 9 of the 10 were divested, and Mental Health Center Penetanguishene was the last one to be divested, and that happened just over 10 years ago. At that time, it was divested to a brand new hospital corporation that was sponsored and continues to be sponsored by the Catholic Health Sponsors of Ontario. And so that sponsoring organization sponsors large hospitals like St. Michael's, which is now part of Unity Healthcare, and also smaller long-term care facilities and hospitals in communities across the province. We have about 1,200 employees, and our annual operating budget is about $150 million. And so because healthcare, and particularly mental health care, is very person resource intensive, about 85 to 90% of our budget is paid out in salaries. So if you think about that as an economic impact on our small area, it is significant. When we became a public hospital, like all public hospitals, we now have an obligation to have what's called a local share, our own funds contributed to capital projects. And so as a result of that, we became a member and qualified to become a member of the Simcoe County Hospital Alliance. And so many of you know about the county's capital contribution to hospitals, and we're very grateful to be able to access those funds. Just in terms of quality, Accreditation Canada is an external body that comes in and reviews hospitals. We've achieved over our last several visits exemplary status, which is the highest level of quality. We're just gearing up for our next accreditation in May, and so we hope to be able to continue that level of quality. We'll also talk in a little bit more about the Research Institute, which we're very fortunate to have as part of our hospital. One thing that I will point out on this slide, we show the number of admissions and discharges, and probably another myth is that patients come to our hospital and stay there for the rest of their life, which is not true. You can see the number of admissions and number of discharges are almost equal, so patients are coming in and moving out depending on their level of wellness. We do have some patients who, because of their age and the length of time they've been with us, are aging in place. So the hospital, the inpatient services are almost equally divided between what we call the regional division and our provincial division. So the beds in the regional division serve a catchment area of Simcoe County and Muskoka up to Parry Sound. So we serve the needs of the emergency department in Parry Sound, and then down to the south to Dufferin County. We have a number of specialty inpatient clinical programs. One that is probably an anomaly for a specialized mental health center is our acute assessment program. And that would be like the mental health inpatient program at RVH or at Aurelia Soldiers Memorial Hospital. This program has 20 beds, and typically patients come when they are in an acute phase of their illness, and they probably stay for about 8 to 10 days. The other regional programs are specialty programs. It may be for a person with an addiction and mental health challenge, a geriatric program, a developmental delay, and a mental illness. And typically those patients would stay for slightly longer. So like other regional programs like cancer and cardiac care, you can think of our regional programs as the regional specialty mental health hospital. And then the provincial programs, these were the programs that were previously in the building known as Oak Ridge. It is the province's only high-secure provincial or high-secure forensic mental health programs. And there are 4 programs within that division. Again, the one called the Forensic Assessment Program, those would be shorter stay. Often those patients are with us for about 30 or 60 days, depending on what they come to us for. And then the other 3 programs would have, again, longer stays, would stay for treatment and recovery, and then typically move on to a lower level of care in what perhaps might be their home community, since these patients are coming from around the province. And these programs moved into the new atrium building in May of 2014. We also serve many patients who live in the community, so we have about 1,000 registered outpatients, and across all of our programs, about 25,000 visits with staff. There are 2 physical locations. The outpatient mental health programs located in the building in the parking lot at Georgian Bay General Hospital, and you can see the services that are there. Typically, these patients would have a mild to moderate mental illness. They may be recently discharged from hospital, and then our outpatient teams may be supporting them as they await receiving treatment from another community provider, perhaps Wendat as an example. We also have a transitional age youth psychiatric consultation service, and that's for individuals aged 16 to 24, and it's a consultation with a psychiatrist that would provide recommendations to a primary care provider. The second location is our Hero Center, and you can see the various services that are attached to that building. And those are the 2 programs and 2 physical areas that are going to move into the new community health hub. And so this building is a purpose-built building. And it is a partnership between Chigamik Community Health Center and Waypoint. And in addition to our outpatient programs, the Chigamik CHC will move from their current King Street location in Midland. And so the downtown Midland location, we had our director, Ruth Cameron, talking about it yesterday. Our outpatients had been typically and historically provided services in downtown Midland. And so moving down there in the proximity to the other services like the Hero Center, but also the services downtown will be much better for our clients. Since subsequent to getting approval to move forward with the Community Health Hub, we actually also received approval for a youth wellness hub, and there exist 4 in the province currently. They were pilots, and subsequently 6 additional were approved. There were about 40 applications, and we were fortunate enough to be one of the 6 that were approved. So you can see the types of services that will be provided, and when we talk about youth and children and adolescents, there is never a static age group, so this is for youth aged 12 to 25, and it is not only about treating mental health challenges or mental illness. It's also to address primary health care, education, employment training, housing, any other social services. So it's really meant to be a one-stop shop. The youth hubs that have been approved across the province are moving forward collectively to develop a somewhat standardized approach, recognizing that there are different needs in each of the communities that have been approved for these. So this is just getting up and running, and it will be part and parcel of the programs operated in the new hub, which does look like that if you drive by on Bayshore. We've just finished off the siding on the outside of it, and it looks lovely on the outside. Inside there is nothing. It's completely empty. And so we are continuing to work with the Ministry of Health to have approval to move forward with the interior building. We've continued to plan, so the teams from Chigamik and Waypoint Outpatients have been working on what the interior should be designed like in order to provide the programs and services. So that's ready to go once we get the approval from the Ministry of Health. And lastly, I'll just talk a little bit about our research and academics. So we were very fortunate at the time of divestment. The Mental Health Center Penetanguishene had a really rich history with research. There had been a research department there for about 30 or 40 years. That was somewhat unique, and when the new hospital assumed operation of the Mental Health Center, we determined that we needed to look at research and academics and actually broaden the research that was being done. Primarily in its early days, it was research was being done that was applicable to the patients in our provincial forensic programs. And now we're looking at trying to do research that would apply to any or all of our programs and actually bring that research much more quickly to the bedside. There's an estimate that it takes about 17 years to get research from research to actually impacting care, and so we're really trying to shorten that period of time. So we have about 15 people on the scientific team, and there's a real variety of backgrounds in psychologists, psychiatrists, research assistants, and you can see the list of types of research that we have been doing over the last little while and continue to do. So I talked about some of the history and what we're currently up to. We also have a master plan for the next 30 years. It's part of the planning for our campus. We have some short-term goals. By building the atrium building, we were able to move some of the programs from our regional, the tall tower, the Tawanshi building, into the new building. So that's created some space that over the short term we can use to provide a therapy mall, for example, and activation areas in that building. And then over the longer term, a 30-year vision to replace that Tawanshi tower. Sometimes we have up to 6 patients in a room, and so if you've ever been in a hospital and had even 3 other patients with you in a room, you know that that is not the best or conducive to providing care. And so we know that that building is no longer meeting the needs. We also, in the 30-year vision, have plans to have further academic buildings, housing, and expand the campus. So with that, a few upcoming events, including our gala and the coldest night coming up on February 23rd. I'm happy to answer any questions, Your Worship, if there are any.
Thank you, Carol. Members of council, do we have questions for Carol? I guess not.
Great.
Thank you for the wonderful presentation.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to deputations presentations. We now have a presentation from Culture North Simcoe, the committee chair, Mr. Fred Hacker. Welcome, Fred.
Thank you very much. Good evening, members of council. I'm here this evening to propose to you that the delivery of culture in North Simcoe become a regional service. And the proposal I'm bringing to you is that we would have a committee that would represent the townships of Tiny and Tay, the towns of Penetanguishene and Midland, and the Bosley First Nation, which would become the central culture committee for all 5 communities. I have with me this evening Karen Mealing, who is the Cultural Development Coordinator for our current Culture North Simcoe Committee. And I would also mention another committee member is sitting to your left, Your Worship. Anita is also on the committee and a very valuable member of our committee. So I'll begin just by explaining to you the current status. The Midland Cultural Plan was developed in 2013, adopted in 2014, and it specifically contemplated a regional approach to cultural planning. At the time that plan was prepared, even then it became evident that our communities here are so intertwined that people don't do their culture necessarily in the community where they live or in the community where they work, and there is a lot of backing and forthing. The plan, in the body of the plan specifically, talked to collaboration reaching to the wider region, about establishing regional alliances and joint strategies, about ongoing dialogue with neighboring municipalities, and about advancing a regional cultural agenda. And that, in fact, is what we're here this evening to discuss. Once the committee got going with its work, it quickly developed that cultural activity doesn't recognize geographic boundaries, that many of the people who were engaged in our Culture Midland activities were in fact not Midland residents, and I can tell you that a significant majority of our current committee do not live in Midland, representing the fact that culture in this area is a regional activity rather than a municipal-centric activity. In 2016, our committee decided that it was going to be necessary to reach beyond the geographic limits to provide services, and in 2017, the Midland Council approved expansion of the activities beyond the municipality. And then during the past year, we've had representatives from Penetanguishene, from Tiny, and from Tay, including Deputy Mayor Anita Dubo, who has been sitting on our committee and assisting us with our activities. In 2017, we got a Trillium Seed grant, and that allowed us to hire Karen Mealing as the Cultural Development Coordinator. And the programs that were to be delivered under that were all regionally based, so it was recognized even by Trillium that we were going to be delivering programs on a regional basis. And I just thought I'd highlight for you the two goals of the existing plan, one to promote cultural activity and the other to celebrate and leverage cultural resources. The current committee believes that the most effective and appropriate way to achieve those goals is on a regional basis. That is, to establish a joint committee to represent the 5 communities of North Simcoe. I'm showing you here some of the activities in which our committee has been engaged, and the first 12 are things that were done during the past year. And in each case, all 4 of our local municipalities were represented in these activities. We have been doing culture awards for 4 years now, and we have, notwithstanding that it used to be called the Culture Midland Awards, we had nominees from the town of Penetanguishene, from the townships of Tiny and Tay, and winners representing those communities. Our Entrepreneur program is a program which brings together people who are engaged in creative activities so that they can learn how to take their art and have a more business-like approach to it, how to market, how to commoditize, how to financially be more rewarding, and also an opportunity to work with other people. So some of these other programs like the Tart Music and Art Festival, the cruise ship visits, the tall ships that's coming up in 2019. In each of those cases, what's going on is that we're engaging artists, musicians, performers to present their cultural activities. So when cruise boats come in, folks from Penetanguishene may well be there meeting them, showing their art, and then they're paid an honorarium for the activity that they provide. So this is just a list. I'll direct your attention to the Great Lakes Shipwreck. This is a program that is put on in cooperation with Discovery Harbor, and what is involved in it is a marine archaeology program that's taking place right out here in the bay, and our Culture Midland Committee was supporting that. So this is the proposal that I'd like you to consider, that We've been authorized by the town of Midland, to whom our committee originally reported, to seek the support of the town of Penetanguishene, the townships of Tiny and Tay, and the Boseley First Nation to create a joint cultural committee. And I can tell you that at the Town of Midland Council meeting in January, where this was approved, it was adopted by a 9-0 vote by the Midland Council. They saw the need for and the wisdom of making this a joint cultural committee. I spoke on Monday morning at the Township of Tiny, this morning at the Township of Tay. We're here this evening speaking to you, and I'm meeting with the chief of the Boseley First Nation on Friday to present this same proposal to him. So we're very hopeful that the 5 communities will come together. One of the first steps will be a temporary appointment of both a council member and a staff person to our committee to create terms of reference. So if you agree that this is a good idea, then we would want the terms of reference to represent what the 5 communities think is appropriate, not just what the existing terms of reference are. So it would be a couple of meetings at most where one of your councillors, one of your staff people would meet with representatives from the other municipalities to generate terms of reference, which would then dictate the activity of the committee, the funding of the committee, and the appointment of representatives to the committee. The third point is then that you would make your appointments in accordance with the terms of reference. We are asking each community for $10,000 per annum for programming, and I'll show you in a moment a budget as to how that is to be expended. And then each community would be invited to make one staff person available as a support. The town of Midland has committed the $10,000, and they have indicated that they will make available as an additional contribution the services of Karen Mealing, who would continue to be provided with office space and support in the town of Midland, but she would become responsible to and report to the 5 councils of the 4 municipalities and the First Nation. And your representative on staff would only be involved with activities here in Penetanguishene. So if we were putting on or supporting a cultural program in Penetanguishene, then Karen would work with your staff person to liaison to deliver that program. Very quickly, this is a preliminary budget, and I must tell you it's preliminary because I may not even be on the committee that your representatives appoint, but this is a sample budget that would show how Karen and I have conceived that the funds would be expended. So $5,000 would go towards the cultural awards, which would represent the best of our cultural creative people in the 5 communities. $7,000 for the Entrepreneur Program. This is a program in cooperation with the County of Simcoe. This is the training program that I was talking to you about, where we bring people who are used to doing their activity in a basement or a garage or an attic, bring them into the mainstream, have them meet other people who are engaged in similar programs, and hopefully allow them to build and to become part of the creative employed class in our society. $6,000 for a symposium, which would bring everybody in the cultural community together. We have a calendar that has and it's already running, and in fact your Penetanguishene cultural activities are already on it, but it takes about $2,000 a year to support that calendar. $5,000 for grants. We would make grants to each of the festivals. I'll just close by quickly telling you that there are a number of benefits to your particular community of this, and I'm going to just suggest 9 of them to you. One of them is that regional culture and creative pursuits are intrinsically intertwined. When we started doing the work of what was then the Culture Midland Committee, we quickly found that we were dealing with all of the municipalities, that people were living in one municipality, doing their artistic endeavors in another, and perhaps working in a third. We will avoid duplication of services. We'll avoid duplication of conflicting events. It'll provide a wider audience for all of our cultural components. It will reduce the cost of each municipality because we'll have a single cultural committee. The engagement between the Bosley First Nation and the mainland is something that's very exciting to me, and I must tell you also very exciting to Chief Meneg, who's looking forward to exploring the possibilities of bringing their culture to the mainland. It will further the sharing of services, it will provide a model of inter-community cooperation, and provide the opportunity for further affiliations between the creatives in our communities. I can tell you, having worked with the County of Simcoe about this project, that this is the first time in Ontario that municipalities, independent municipalities and communities are being invited to cooperate in a cultural pursuit like this. We're excited about it, and we'd love to count on your support. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Fred. Members of council, do we have any questions for Mr. Hacker? Yes, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you very much, Fred, for coming forward. I wonder if you could just expand a little on Karen's and the responsibility that Midland has agreed to. The money that you're asking for the 5 municipalities is strictly on events and programming.
Only for programming. It would not
Yep.
go towards Karen's salaries. Karen's salary will be paid by the town of Midland. That's part of the commitment that they've made to the other communities, is that they will look after both her salary and providing a workspace for her and telephone and that sort of support. However, she would answer to the 5 municipalities in terms of her cultural activities.
Thank you. Good presentation, Fred. Thank you.
Oh, thanks very
It's
much.
150%, I think, better than the one we got a year or two ago. I think those that are sitting here would recognize that for sure. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Okay, members of council, there are no further questions. Thank you, Fred, for the presentation,
Thanks for
and
the opportunity.
it'll be taken under consideration.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, we now move on to number 6, adoption of minutes not already confirmed. I have moved by Councillor Cummings and seconded by Councillor Buddebooker that the following minutes of council meetings be confirmed and adopted as circulated. Special council meeting minutes, January 23, 2019. Council meeting minutes, January 23, 2019. Committee of the Whole meeting minutes, January 23, 2019, and Special Committee of the Whole, February 6, 29. Does anyone have any questions, concerns? All in favor? It's carried. Moving on to our consent agenda, there's nothing. Under 8, matters for consideration. 8A, that the Council of the Town of Penetanguishene ratify the Mayor's public appointments to the following town advisory committees. Committee of Adjustment, Tony Huguenin, and to the Penetanguishene Public Library Board, Sharon Rogers and Doreen Vaillancourt. All in favor? Carried.
Sorry, Your Worship, I didn't hear a mover and seconder for those.
They were Councillor Buddebooker and Councillor Cummings. Moving on to 8B, the dedicated gas tax funds for public transportation agreement. It is moved by Councillor, and I know it's seconded by Deputy Mayor Dubo. Is that Jessica? Oh, that's Mr. Mayotte. Moved by Councillor Mayotte and seconded by Deputy Mayor Dubo that Council enter a letter of agreement with Her Majesty the Queen and Right of Ontario as represented by the Minister of Transportation for the provision of gas tax funding for the town of Penetanguishene Transit System, and that a bylaw for the contribution agreement be brought forward by staff for council approval. Questions or concerns? All in favor? It's carried. Moving on to C, appointments to the Main Street Ad Hoc. I will declare conflict and have Deputy Mayor take that one.
Sorry,
I'll give you
sorry,
the
Deputy Mayor
motion.
Dubois, just to clarify, Mayor LaRue, if you could just state the reason for your conflict just for the minutes.
Because my wife is being as one of the members, so it's not that there's going to be any pecuniary interest, but my old nemesis, Mr. Gagne, once told me that if you perceive it to be, declare it.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Clue, that the following residents be appointed to the Main Street Art Ad Hoc Committee. Deputy Mayor Anita Dubois, Council Rep and Chair, Kathleen Buchan, Andrea Cole, Judith Davies, Blanche Fox, Jenny LaRue, Karen LaCroix Mealing, Jean Miller, Michael Odess, Anthony Orsatti, Nathaniel Woods, and Ron Lepage. And that Virginia Eichhorn, probably that's not correct. Virginia of the Quest Art School and Gallery be invited to participate in the Main Street Art Ad Hoc Committee as a resource and non-voting member. As council is aware, this was something that came forward last fall, and council felt that it should be a decision that was made currently in 2019. We did agree to this a month or so ago, and so this is now establishing the committee and a good mix of people, and I know that our planner has some great ideas to bring forward to this committee, so hopefully everyone will agree and we will move forward and certainly bring any recommendations back to council. So it has been moved and seconded. I call for the vote. All those in favor? Carried.
Thank you. Moving on to D, is moved by Councillor Cummings and seconded by Councillor Vadeboncoeur, that council approve the issuance of a request for proposal for consultation services for the development of a community-based strategic plan, and that staff proceed as per the town's procurement policy with the tendering process, and further that staff report back to council with an update following the request for proposal process. Kyra, any questions, concerns? None. All in favor? Carried.
Did I get a mover and seconder?
I did.
Okay.
Councillor Cummings and Vadeboncoeur. Okay, moving on to E. It is moved by Councillor LaRose and seconded by Councillor Saint-Amand that the terms of reference for the Museum and Heritage Advisory Committee and Schedule D of the procedural bylaw be approved as presented, and that the following people be appointed to the Museum and Heritage Advisory Committee: Jane Rogers, Joseph Maurice, Irene Lau, Karen Ryan, Andrea Ahrens, Irene Ashworth, and Fred Patterson. And finally, that the clerk be directed to bring forward the proposed amendments in the amended procedural bylaw. All in favor? Carried. Okay, moving on to 9A, presentation and consideration of report committee of the whole. It is moved by Councillor LaRose and seconded by Councillor Saint-Amand that the recommendations contained within the committee of the whole report related to the recreation and community services section be approved. Does anyone have anything to pull? If not, all in favor? Carried. Moved by Councillor Clue and seconded by Deputy Mayor Dubo that the recommendations contained within the Committee of the Whole related to the Planning and Development Services section be approved. All in favor? Carried. It is moved by Councillor Mayotte and seconded by, I believe, Councillor Clue, that the recommendation contained within the Committee of the Whole report related to the Transportation and Environmental Service section be approved. Does anyone have any wish to pull any of those? No? All in favor? Carried. And it is moved by Councillor Wedebanker, seconded by Councillor Cummings, that the recommendations contained within the Committee of the Whole report related to the Finance and Corporate Services section be approved. Anyone have anything to pull there? No? All in favor? Carried. Moving on to B, Special Committee of the Whole. It is moved by Councillor Cummings, seconded by Councillor Wedebanker, that the recommendations contained within the Special Committee of the Whole report related to the Finance and Corporate Services section be approved. All in favor? Carried. Motions of which notice has been previously given, there are none. Notice of motion, none. Considerations of bylaw. And it is moved by Councillor Wedebanker and seconded by Councillor Cummings that the Council of the Town of Penetanguishene introduce the following bylaws: 2019-10, 2019-11, and 2019-12, and that bylaws be read a first time and deemed to be read a second and third time and carried. All in favor? And then we move on to the question period from media and public. Andrew, none. Questions from the public? No. Announcements and inquiries? Councillor Sinema?
I just wanted to bring to everyone's attention that this weekend is Winterama weekend, so there's lots happening around town. There is the official full schedule will be in tomorrow's paper, but this is just a very quick synopsis. And before I get into it, if anybody that is on Facebook, the schedule is available, so share it on your pages so that it gets out to everybody. You never know who we're going to touch by just getting that out there. So on Friday night is the skate trail and fireworks at Discovery Harbor. The fireworks are at 8 o'clock and the skate trail is open from 6 till 9. On Saturday, we do have the winter, there are actually 2 pancake breakfasts. One is at the Wing House on Saturday and one is at Captain Ken's on Sunday. The Winterama Parade starts at 11, so line up on Main Street. We've got lots more floats this year, so it will be an exciting parade. At 12 is the Polar Plunge down at the town dock. The Demolition Derby is from 2 till 4. There is an outdoor beverage garden, snowmobile rides for the kids, family ice fishing, and then on Sunday there is the cardboard toboggan races, and I believe they're from 10 till 12, and that's at the Sand Pit Hill off of Lawrence Street. There's an arm wrestling tournament. Register with the kids. The registration starts at 11:30, and they actually start at 1:30, and that's at the Brian Orser Hall, and it really gets a lot of people out and enjoying it. And then the adults do their arm wrestling in the evening. There's lots of live music and entertainment around town, and there's also an indoor kid zone. And so it's a good way to get out and enjoy the community.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Sinema. I think it's looking like it might even shape up to be a good weekend compared to the nice weather we've been having the last 2 or 3 days. Any other further announcements or inquiries? None. So I have that confirmation bylaw 2019-13 be signed and sealed by the mayor and clerk, and that is moved by Councillor Cummings and seconded by Councillor Wedebanker. All in favor? Carried. And mover to adjourn, Counselor Cummings and Counselor Mayat. And we'll take a 5-minute break and then carry on with our committee of the whole. Okay, Council, we will get underway with our Committee of the Whole Council meeting Wednesday, February 13th. And first of all, the call to order and approval of the agenda. Committee of the Whole agenda, February 13, 2019. Recommended action that the Committee of the Whole agenda for February 13, 2019 be approved as presented. A mover, Councilor LaRose, seconder, Councilor Mayat. All in favor? Carried. Moving on to 3, declaration of pecuniary interest. If anyone has one, declare now or at a later date. Councillor Vadeboncoeur.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will not be declaring a pecuniary interest, but I will be making a transparency disclosure. Under our agenda later, in our agenda under Finance and General Government, there's a report dealing with pay equity and compensation review, Report 9B, Roman numeral 8. And in the report, the town of Wasaga Beach is noted as a comparator municipality, and that may give rise to some misunderstanding with respect to the town of Wasaga Beach's role given my full-time employment with the town of Wasaga Beach. I did consult with our Integrity Commissioner, Principals Integrity, about the situation, and I'm advised that because the town of Wasaga Beach does not use Penetanguishene as a comparator, therefore Wasaga Beach wages are not based on the town of Penetanguishene's wages, that I'm not in a situation where I'd be in a pecuniary interest. So to be clear, I'm just making this disclosure of transparency so that everybody's aware of it, just in case it did come up. I also wanted to indicate that we do have a closed session component of this dealing with the pay equity compensation review later in the agenda, and we may get into conversation about specific individuals. If at that point we do, or specific positions, if we do at that point get into a discussion about the CAO position, I will excuse myself from that discussion because I've been advised by the Integrity Commissioner that any discussion in relation to that could be deemed to be a potential conflict of interest. So again, this is a transparency disclosure for the record, given my full-time employment with the town of Wasaga Beach. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vadeboncoeur. So noted. We will move on to 4 presentations and delegations, and the first one we have this evening is a presentation from Susan McDonald, Community Reach, Recapital Request Transportation Linking Communities. Welcome, Susan.
Thank you, and thank you, Mayor LaRue and the council members for giving us the opportunity to speak to you tonight. I'd just like to introduce the chair of our board of directors, who's in the audience tonight, Kate Arnold, and look forward to telling you a bit about our programs. So Community Reach has 3 main program areas. So Transportation Linking Communities, our accessible transit program that we run, which is, our first one is for residents across North Simcoe. AT is for residents of Midland who can't access the conventional transit, and they go to destinations both within Midland and Penetanguishene. And we have an in-depth online community information database that I just want to touch on briefly. There are 1,800 records in this database. These are curated records. They are for programs and services in North Simcoe and for programs that serve North Simcoe residents. These programs are uploaded to 211, to Healthline, to crisis lines, so these records are used throughout, and they record quite a bit of what's happening in your community, and it's accessible to your residents so that they know what's happening and what's available to them in the community. I'm here to talk to you about Transportation Linking Communities, and this is a program that we are in our 15th year of delivering to Penetanguishene residents. So this program's been going on for a long time. The TLC rides that we give within North Simcoe are for health professionals, for social activities, for shopping, for personal errands. And then we do a great number of rides that go throughout Simcoe County, the Newmarket area, Parry Sound, Greater Toronto, Hamilton, wherever there is a specialized health service that one of your residents requires. So again, these are the reasons for the program and the locations and destinations that we've been going to for all of these 15 years. The rides are provided in volunteer cars and in an accessible van. And we have an absolutely amazing crew of volunteer drivers, some of whom I know that you know. And they do an absolutely huge service to our communities across North Simcoe. I've put up a picture of our current community van to give you an idea of what we're looking at when we come to you asking about a second van for this program. And so this is a van that was donated by the Rotary Club, by every single one of the Lions clubs in the area, the Victoria Harbour Legion, and a number of other sources to get that vehicle on the road. And that's taking care of people in this program that need accessibility and need to get places. And I've popped in a picture of one of our volunteer drivers with her vehicle and one of the people that she drives. So just to give you an idea of that van. The little bit about the program. So the TLC program gave 4,649 rides in 2018, 1,324 of those for Penetanguishene residents. And in total for Penetanguishene residents, we've given over 13,000 rides over the program's life. The volunteers and drivers in this program drove 206,000 kilometers last year, so they are really taking people great distances. And a lot of the medical appointments are critical medical appointments that people are going to, and they run the range. So they're everything from very serious illnesses for cancer appointments, for cardiac care, and often for children at Toronto Sick Kids. So it's a wide variety of people that are being served. And for people that ride in our program, some may only ride with us 3 to 4 times. It might be for a set of medical treatments. It might be for a single operation. And then we serve, a great number of seniors on a regular basis for their basic needs. 32% of our riders are in the 18 to 64-year-old group. 68% are 65 and over. And out of that 68%, 20% are 85 years and over. So these are people that are reaching a point in their life where they require assistance. They may require assistance into the car or their wheelchair into the van. They have mobility devices. They may need help when they get to whichever appointment they're going to. They may need help navigating the building that they're going to because it's strange and different than what they're used to. And we provide that service as well to them when they travel on those appointments. Big thing is the outcomes. And in a very big way, we're helping our seniors and others to maintain their independence. And this is a really big piece for them, that they can remain independent, they can go shopping, they can continue to do the social outings that they love, they can get to their medical appointments. And the social connections part is very important for them. We see improved health, and we see emotional health and well-being as a result of being connected to their community. And we know that it's very important that they maintain those connections. There are 2 things that we also see. It's a reduction of social and geographic isolation, and so we do serve a huge number of seniors that are living alone, and this is their connection back into the community. And we're helping those seniors to age in place so that they can stay in their homes or apartments and function well. Our organization works in a number of things that you will probably be familiar with as a council. So we're part of the Community Transportation Link, which is a portal group. We work with Red Cross, Helping Hands, CHATS, and transportation organizations with an overall goal of more rides to more people to more destinations, which is our tagline. And so within that portal development, we work with CareDove and the County of Simcoe to develop a robust portal where eventually people will be able to book their own rides. And we also have a piece that we're building where health specialists can also book for a patient. So if they know their appointment is coming up, they can pre-book and with us, and then that ride provision will take place. The good news, of course, is with the funding that came down from the provincial government that the portal is likely to move forward at this point in time. We're supporting the LINKS system, so as the LINKS develop the intermunicipal pieces between each, we may be bringing people to that takeoff point, depending on what health level they're at. So we're involved with that. And we're involved with a number of things, and I'll give you one example. We worked with Chigamik and with the Health Links program through Chigamik, and they, for their high need group of people, we ended up taking all of their transportation pieces, and we deliver all of the rides for that client base through Community Reach. So we have a number of relationships and that are built like that in order to be able to get people where they need to go when they need to go. And we're here for just a request, and we have a goal of $26,600 to put a new vehicle on the road, another van. And we have $14,500 plus $1,000 from the Euronia Community Foundation for the equipment. For the equipment for that van, and we have support from the Penetanguishene Council for this vehicle, and we are asking for further support. So we're hoping to come to you, talk to you about the importance of the program, and ask for an additional $9,000 to put this vehicle on the road. And we'll continue to fundraise for the balance. We really appreciate the support that we've received to date, but we hope you will, based on the large number of rides that we give to your community members, that you'll consider giving us a bit of further support and helping us to get the van on the road this spring.
Members of council, do you have any questions? Councillor Saint-Amand?
Just a quick question, because I don't know. How much have we provided up to this point?
In March of 2018, the council put $10,000 toward the van.
And that's part of the 14.5?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Further questions? Councillor Boisdemarqueur?
Thank you. Hello, Susan.
Hello.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
With respect to the vans, how many vans in total do you have?
In this Transportation Linking Communities program,
Yes.
just one van. Everything else is volunteer driver cars. So the van gave us the opportunity to do wheelchairs, people with mobility devices, but also to do multiple rides. The van, we can load it, so the van often comes to Georgian Village with a group of seniors, some of whom may have a mobility device, or we may just be filling the rest of the seats in that. In our accessible transit program, we have 4 vans, so you may see those vans around town. So, but that is a separate program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Further questions? Councillor Cummings.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening.
Good evening.
In your original letter, it said that you had got the amount from the town, but you failed to get any other sponsors or supporters. What happened there?
Well, we started to. So we do have 2 businesses that have contributed in Euronia Community Foundation. And then we were invited to come to the town of Midland for the possibility of another capital piece So with not having happened, we needed to sort of go back to the drawing board. So we wanted to come back to you and say we'd still love your support towards that van, and then we'll start fundraising among our service clubs.
Okay, so
And-
nothing has been done since 2016 when the $10,000 was given?
No, we got that in 2018.
I think it was approved in 2016, wasn't it?
Yeah, but we didn't
Yeah,
see
okay.
that until March of 2018.
Okay, thank
Sorry.
you.
Yeah.
Deputy Mayor Dubo?
Just a clarification, it may have been approved, but it was pending surplus. There was a number of donations that council had kind of agreed to, but did it not depend if there was a surplus? So as we all know, that takes time to be verified, so it did take some time to come full circle.
Okay, no further questions. Thank you, Susan, and we will certainly take it under consideration.
Great, thank you very much.
So our next presentation is from Kathy Willis, Euronia Transition Homes Capital Request Operation Grow.
And this is Kathy.
Welcome, Kathy.
You can introduce yourself. Unfortunately, Kathy Willis couldn't be here today. She's been taken out of the area on a course. But I'm Haley MacDonald, the Director of Operations for our organization. So I thank you so much for having us here today, and I'll be the one speaking to you about Operation Grow. However, she was really upset she couldn't make it to say hello to all of the new council members and a new mayor, as well as those who are in their seats still. So thank you so much. As I said, I'm Haley MacDonald. I work with Huronia Transition Homes. For those of you who know about our organization, we run 4 programs across Simcoe County. We have La Maison Rosewood Shelter in Midland that services North Simcoe. We also have Choices for Children, which runs in 5 communities throughout Simcoe County. We operate Athena's Sexual Assault Counseling and Advocacy Center that provides counseling for women who have experienced sexual violence. And now, as of August, we're now providing longer-term counseling support for women who have experienced domestic violence. And we also operate Operation Grow that I'll be talking to you about today. In all, our program serves about 1,000 women a year throughout Simcoe County, and we operate is primarily in our counseling programs with a wait list. So we do recognize a huge need for women and children in the community who have experienced violence. Just to give you an idea, in the last fiscal year, I couldn't pull this fiscal year's numbers yet because they aren't up, but we served 22 women and children in our shelter from Penetang. We served 20 women from Penetang in our counseling program. We provided transitional support, housing support, and legal support to 18 women from Penetang, and we served 2 families, 4 women and children in our children's program who, again, were from Penetang. So we do we do have a large number of women and children from this area who are accessing service with us. So today, primarily, we want to talk about Operation Grow. I know we were here last year and we did a presentation about Operation Grow, so many of you probably know about it, but for those of you who are new to it, Operation Grow is our newest program, and we're very proud of it. It is a way, as an organization that has been in Simcoe County for 31 years, and we're serving women who have experienced violence, and now the 3rd generation of women, Operation Grow was envisioned as a way to break the cycle of violence and poverty that so many of the women and children in our community face. So we spoke with women who had accessed our programs, and we came up with this idea of a social enterprise that is really holistically built. It incorporates an employment program, a vertical farm, so there's access to food. It's 10 steps to fresh greens. We have an inspected kitchen, and we have a yoga and meditation studio. So we've combined all of these things. We have a food collective every day now. Operation Grow is open for a drop-in for women in the community, and we are running weekly workshops in our kitchen. So what we did was when we designed this program, it was really to address poverty, food scarcity, de-skilling, isolation, and the impacts of violence against women. What we've seen in the last year of operating is that we're actually able to deliver on some of these outcomes that we had anticipated. We've integrated a full evaluation framework, and we meet with women when they enter into our program, and we do a mapping of assets, kind of like where are you and what do you have in your life? And we look at finances, access to transportation, we look at whether they're in a healthy, unhealthy relationship at that time, and then they speak to us about where they're at, and then, we do an evaluation and we do a survey to see, okay, after 6 months of being with Operation Grow, has anything changed? And our evaluators have shown that actually it has. Women are reporting that they're reducing isolation, that they're feeling like they're able to become free from the impacts of trauma that has taken over so much of their life. And we really believe that with this program, we can slowly but surely have a greater impact. Some women have also reported that they finally feel proud because of access to Operation Grow and getting affordable greens at a discounted rate, they can reduce their need to access a food bank. So they're actually building food security. So as I say, we set very ambitious social outcomes for ourselves, and it's pretty amazing to see that we're able to reach lots of them. Access to healthy food. We run, as I said, a weekly workshop, so we're increasing women's confidence and nutritional knowledge. And we're providing a space where women can come and access service, and it's not they're not just building relationships with a counselor. We're breaking that up, and we're facilitating a space where they can build relationships with one another. So that changes it. You're not just, building a support network of paid employees. You're building a support network of peers, and peers who all have had a similar experience to your own. One of the biggest outcomes and one of the programs that we've spent the most time on this year has been our training and employment program. This is actually downstairs in the old LCBO in Midland, so it's transformed quite a bit. And we have built a training program for women, and it's a 4-day program. Tomorrow is actually the last day of our 4th round of cohort of women, and it brings women together to learn standard things, going through WMIS, Employment Standards Act, getting health and safety in 4 steps, various certification in terms of employment, and it also teaches them about working in a vertical farm. And in the end, we offer low barrier employment opportunities in the farm where women can work 3 hours a week, and either in our vertical farm or in our maintenance program, depending on their level or their ability to work and where their desire is. And we integrated learning strategies into this, which has been, I guess, where the most positive feedback has come. Recognizing that when you grow up in a home, or if you're in a home that's characterized by violence, it's often chaotic. And if you're living in chaos, we all know, going to school, it's much more difficult to learn. Trying to even contemplate employment is something that's really difficult if it's not been something that's modeled for you. So we built in these strategies of, okay, I'm in this classroom, I'm in this training and employment program, now I'm actually going to be taught how to learn what's being presented to me. And so we're seeing, people are saying that the skills that they're learning in our training program is actually something that's transferable, and it's becoming they're using it to impact other aspects of their life. Some women report that the tools that they've learned in the program, they're taking home and they're using it with their children to try and provide some type of order in their home that might have previously been chaotic. We've received great feedback. Women are reporting that they're increasing their knowledge about employment, and that it's been an overall positive experience. I really wanted to highlight that program because it's something that's been really effective to us. I didn't know that I only had 10 minutes, so I built you a really big presentation, so please feel free to read it. I've developed another one, but I didn't hand it in, but that's just a picture of our vertical farm. As those of you might have seen in our press release, at the moment, our vertical farm doesn't have greens growing in it. We are on a temporary decommission. We have faced an ongoing HVAC issue, and thank goodness we have come up with an action plan for it to finally be resolved once and for all after 18 months of struggling. So we're upset that it's closed temporarily, but we are really excited to know that a solution is looming, and by March we will be planting our plants again, and in April providing greens to the community. And I guess I should say we've had countless community partners, and one of the things that Operation Grow has been able to do, different from our other programs, is created a new interface for us to engage with the community and build partnerships that we didn't think were previously possible. So we work with the County of Simcoe. We've partnered with their Ontario Works program. We've engaged with Lakehead University. They provide us subject matter expertise in order for us to develop our business plan, change our business plan, update our business plan, because it is our vision that once everything is rectified in terms of the HVAC malfunction that we had at Operation Grow, we built this program to be fully self-sustaining. So we truly believe that the revenue that we generate from the vertical farm produce sales in our retail space and the room rental program that we have, along with the catering program, that we can offset all of the costs for running the social programs at Operation Grow. And then I guess I'll leave it there because I don't want to go over my 10 minutes. But we are asking the town of Penetanguishene to support us in our kitchen program. Last year, last January, we were invited to come to council and we received a check for $12,000 to help us equip our kitchen. With that, we were able to purchase equipment. We purchased blenders. We purchased absolutely everything to fill our kitchen and be able to provide workshops for women to work with healthy foods and be able to use, we do a lot of taking food from the food bank and how do you make it into something that's more nutritious that can go further. And so we're asking for the $12,000 so that we can finish the equipping of our kitchen, primarily in that we don't actually have a table in our kitchen at the moment. We have a bunch of kind of temporary tables that we've set up in a cluster, and we're hoping to replace that with a station where that's really meant for a kitchen as a workshop that's fully accessible to meet the accessibility needs of the members of Operation Grow. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from members of council? Councillor Buddemacher.
Thank you, Worship. Just a question with respect to funding from other municipalities in North Simcoe. Have you received any funding over the last couple of years from any of the other municipalities in North Simcoe?
We have. We did receive funding from the town of Midland last fiscal year, and I believe it was for an amount in the range of $12,000 as well. I can confirm that number and pass it on.
Supplementary, just have you made any requests to the other municipalities in North Simcoe for fiscal 2019?
Not at this time, no.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess my question would be, do you plan on going to the other municipalities?
That is a really good question. At this time, we had not. It is not in our next 4-month plan. However, it is in our plan to relook at our capital campaign for anything that we might need at Operation Grow moving forward. That being said, no, not at this time.
Okay, thank you. We'll take it under consideration.
Thank you so much.
Council, the presentation C&D from BMA Consulting and from Elizabeth Hill will fall under their sections. The presentation from BMA will go under T&E, and the presentation from Elizabeth Hill will follow under FCS. So we'll move on to 5, which is Council Information Package. Council Information Package, January 30th, 2019. The recommended action that the Council Information Package, having been given due consideration, be received for information. Mover, Councillor Saint-Amand, seconder, Councillor Clue, all in favor? Carried. And that will move us on to Section A6, Transportation and Environmental Services, and I will pass it on to Councillor Mayotte.
Thank you, Your Worship. Consent agenda, recommendation action that the following consent agenda items have been given due to consideration and we receive for information. We have one, which is the Environment and Climate Change Canada inspection of Fox Street, warning letter issues. I don't know if you read all the letters, it's a little bit complicated, but if we have any question, Brian Cherry might be able to answer if anybody has any question, but it's just for information. Can I have a mover to accept this? Councilor Rose, a seconder. Councilor Jill Sandoval, all in favor? Thank you. Matters of consideration, water and waste management, water and waste utility rate study update, WW2019-0, recommending for action that the council adopt the water and wastewater long-range financial plan prepared by BNA Management Consulting, Inc. in according with the O Reg 453/07. Okay, so I guess I'm going to turn this one here over to the project manager. I'm just trying to get it on my computer here or there.
I think we could turn it over to Mr. Brian there.
Yeah, we'll turn it over to Mr. Brian. I'm getting a hard time on my computer here. Brian, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Here with us this evening, we have Jim Braziz from BMA Management Consulting, who is the consultant that completed our water, wastewater our utility rate study update, and he's here tonight with us, braving the roads all the way from Hamilton today to be with us here this evening, and he has a presentation on the results of the utility rate study update. Jim.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Worship, members of council. As Brian mentioned, here to present the long-range financial plan in accordance with the Ontario regulations. Every 5 years, it's required that a financial plan be conducted by a municipality in order to renew its water license. The town's taken a proactive approach in this, and basically the plan allows or calls for a 6-year financial plan, but the town has prepared a 10-year financial plan. The other thing is that the legislation requires only the financial plan for waterworks, but the town is being proactive and also has prepared a wastewater financial plan. So the financial plan that I'm going to be presenting, it's a dynamic document. It's a 10-year projection, so obviously it's based on assumptions over that 10-year period. And so in light of the assumptions, and I'll tell you in a few minutes in the presentation some of the major assumptions that we made. If those assumptions change in the course of the years, the plan should be amended to account for the changes in assumptions. So in terms of the guiding principles we used to establish the long-range financial plan, first of all, to protect and maintain the water and wastewater assets, and that requires contributions to capital for the timely replacement of the capital assets. To ensure a reasonable degree of stability and predictability in the rate burden. The last thing that residents want is volatility in rates. This way they're able to manage budgets. A fair sharing in the distribution of resources between current and future ratepayers. And that's contributing the current generation's fair share for the capital replacement. Sustainable cash flows, financial flexibility, maintaining an adequate reserve balance, and strategically limiting your debt to provide that financial flexibility. And then maintaining programs and services at their current levels. So we looked at, well, what's the current situation? What are the water and wastewater rates in comparison to some of your peer municipalities? And you can see from this chart, we've identified a lot of the municipalities in the area of Penetanguishene. And a residential, just to give you an example, a residential ratepayer that consumes on average 200 cubic meters a year. In Penetanguishene, they pay approximately $1,010. The peer average was $1,198. So it's about a 15% lower fee than the peer average. And you can see on the non-industrial properties with various consumption that the fees are lower in Penetanguishene in terms of the peer average. We also looked at we wanted to see the sort of the current situation and the opening balances. So we looked at the net financial assets. That's the financial assets being the reserves and any debt outstanding. In terms of the net financial assets, you can see from this chart, the waterworks operation has a reserve balance of about $900,000, and there's no debt. On the other hand, the wastewater operation has a negative reserve balance of $1.1 million, and there is debt outstanding related to the wastewater operations of about $9.4 million. So the net financial position of wastewater is about $10.5 million negative balance. So this, what does that mean? A negative balance means that in terms of wastewater going on a go-forward basis, the rates have to include an amount to service these past capital deficits. So our forecast assumptions, what we assumed in the forecast was inflation at 2%. We assumed water revenues would require a 0% increase for the first 3 years and 1% thereafter from 2022 to 2028. As I mentioned, it does have a $900,000 reserve balance. On the other hand, as I mentioned as well, there's a negative net financial assets in the wastewater operations. So to sustain the wastewater operations, it would require about a 6% increase in 2019 to 22, and then 4% thereafter. The residential consumption, that's an important thing to take into consideration because the wastewater and the water operations are highly fixed. About 85 to 90% of the costs are fixed. So regardless, if consumption decreases, there's not a correlation between the expenditures and the decrease in consumption. So what's been happening over the past few years is there has been a decrease in the residential consumption. You had a loss of a major industry, a high school closure. There's been reduced consumption at the hospital. So as I say, this reduced consumption puts pressure on the rates. On a go-forward basis, we think it's kind of leveled out. There's going to be a little bit of growth, but there's going to be additional conservation with respect to the existing homeowners. So we're assuming no projected increase in consumption when we determine the rates. We looked at the rate structure, and the Canadian Waterworks Association, they say that there's a lot of variation. There's no standard rate structure across municipalities. But what the heart of the rate structure is having a volumetric and a fixed rate, similar to what you have here in Penetanguishene. And in fact, we surveyed over 100 Ontario municipalities. And of those municipalities that we surveyed, approximately 90% have a similar two-tier rate structure. So in terms of your rate structure, the existing practice is to recover 76 to 78% of revenues from the volumetric rate, and the remainder would be from the fixed monthly rate. We think that's a good approach, and that on a go-forward basis, we would recommend that you continue to recover 76 to 78% on the volumetric rates. The allocation, it supports a number of the guiding principles. It supports affordability objectives. And the other thing, too, is that having an amount on the volumetric rates, there is a benefit if people wish to conserve in the future. So I just want to talk a little bit about reserves. It's very important to have reserve balances. As I mentioned, there is a negative reserve balance in the wastewater operation. So the purpose of the reserves, why it's necessary, is to provide for rate stabilization. As I say, consumption changes every year. It's volatile. So you want to have some reserves to back up in case there's an extremely wet year, for example, and consumption decreases, and that would cause a negative balance in your budget. So you want to have some reserves to provide for that stabilization. You want to have reserves to provide for financing for one-time items. You don't want to put a one-time item in the budget and then have to take it out the following year. You want to have reserves most importantly, for the replacement, the timely replacement of your capital infrastructure. As I said, water and wastewater are very capital intensive, and it's necessary to build the reserves for the ultimate replacement of that capital infrastructure. Reserves avoid spikes in the funding requirements. They provide a source of internal financing, so having reserves available, you can finance that capital replacement internally, and you don't have to issue debt externally. They obviously provides for sustainable cash flows and financial sustainability. So when we look over the 10 years in our projection, you can see the contributions to reserves, and you can see it's growing each year. On a the green is the consolidated number between water and wastewater, so it's going up each year. The water contribution is pretty flat through the period because, as I mentioned, it's got a $900,000 balance, and we're not projecting big increases. Where we need the increases on the wastewater side, as I said, the wastewater has a negative net financial asset position, or net financial asset position. So you can see the wastewater, the red lines, they're going up through the period. The wastewater reserve over our forecast period, it doesn't go into a positive balance until about the 7th year. So there is a requirement to, again, steadily increase, especially in the wastewater operations, the contribution to reserve. So in terms of our strategy, what we recommend is that you maintain your infrastructure in a state of good repair. So that means that requires cash flows to the capital reserves to have monies to timely replace your assets. And at a minimum, we recommend the town set a target, a minimum target, that target being the annual amortization expense. And you can see from this chart here, the capital contribution target is that blue line. It's a gradual increase on the capital contributions that I just showed you on the reserve, and it gradually hits that capital contribution target. And why we're not doing it more aggressively is because, again, we're cognizant of affordability. So it's a phased process. The capital reserve year-end balances, you can see, as I mentioned, the wastewater operation doesn't go into a positive balance till about year 7. Debt strategies, it's important to have a debt strategy as well. And leading practice in terms of maintaining financial flexibility is that you have 10 to 15% of the debt servicing costs wouldn't exceed your own source revenues. So you can see on this chart here, the 10 to 15%. The debt servicing costs, we're not anticipating debt over the forecast period. You do have that debt outstanding. So it's the debt charges as a percentage of own source revenue is decreasing. It's within that 10 to 15% range through the whole period. And in fact, in year 9, it's slightly below the 10 to 15% range, which gives you some additional financial flexibility. The capital budget, in terms of capital replacement over the next 10 years, it's for water operations, it's about $75 million. And then there's some growth-related expenditures which account for about $183,000. And then in the wastewater operations, over the 10 years, the wastewater capital is $2.6 million for the replacement of your existing assets, and then about $905,000 for growth-related assets. So just to kind of, okay, what does that mean for the ratepayer? This chart, what we did is we looked at a residential customer that consumes about 200 cubic meters a year, and we've shown the impact on this. As I mentioned early on in the presentation, that ratepayer in 2018, the total bill was $1,010. So over the course of the 10 years, we're projecting, based on this financial plan, we're projecting about a 3.6% increase in the first year, 3.7, and 3.8 in year 4. And then beyond that, about a 3% increase So it's just slightly above inflation. But again, the bulk of this increase, the reason for that is the requirement in the wastewater operations. And that's the end of the presentation, Your Worship.
Questions, concerns? Councillor LaRose.
Just one, thank you, Your Worship. In the end, when it gets to 2028, what would our approximate reserve be for the wastewater?
For wastewater, it would be about close to $1 million.
Further questions or concerns? Council.
Thank you. If we could just flip back a couple of slides there, just to the capital program for wastewater. Yeah, that was the water, so it was the wastewater one that I wanted to. Just, could you just explain that slide in a little bit more detail for me?
Yeah. With
Thank you.
this, okay, in 2019, for example, what's been identified in terms of capital is close to $1.2 million. And the blue is the capital attributed to growth. And so there's some capital infrastructure required to service some new growth needs. And then the rest of that little green portion is the replacement. So, and then again, as you go out in each year, that's the total projected capital budget in accordance with your capital plan for each of those years. And we broke it down between growth because that doesn't impact the rates. It's funded through development charges. And then the green is the replacement. That's funded through the rates, so that's why you have to build that capital reserve to fund this capital plan.
Thank you. So if I understood your answer to Councillor Rose's question, that the reserve fund for wastewater is not in a balanced situation until
About year 7.
2026, is that so? We're going to be incurring expenditures up until 2026 on our wastewater side, yet our reserve is going to be in a negative balance. So the funding for those capital expenditures is intended to come from where?
The fortunate thing, there's a positive balance in water, so there's an opportunity to have internal financing. So you'd be borrowing, in essence, borrowing from the water reserve to pay the wastewater, that slight negative balance in the wastewater operations. So it's an internal financing rather than external debt, which you'd pay higher interest rates on.
Thank you.
Okay, further questions? There being none, thank you, Jim, for the wonderful presentation. Actually, it was an excellent presentation, and we thank you for coming up in the great weather this evening, all the way from Hamilton, and hopefully it will be fine for you to return, or we recommend you stay overnight.
Rose?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just want to make sure that we have this right. We're going to borrow the money from the reserve of the water department to pay for the debt for the wastewater for the first 7 years. Then that debt becomes paid and we get back to zero for the internal financing. Does that sound correct? So my question is, have we ever done that before? To the best of my knowledge, we've never borrowed money from the water department for wastewater.
Not that I'm aware.
Brian, can you?
No, you're not aware, or no, it has never happened.
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor LaRose, in my 10 years here, I'm not aware of us doing that.
Just one other quick question then. Did you know of anybody else that's ever done that?
Yes, it's actually they had an internal borrowing.
Generally, the municipalities have a internal borrowing policy, and what ends up happening is that you're lending money from, in this case, if you approve it from the water to the wastewater operations. The wastewater would in fact be paying interest to the water reserve. So it works out that it's a benefit both to the water reserve and also, as I say, you save on interest rates instead of borrowing externally. The alternative is to borrow externally and increase your debt, and that's an option.
Just one more, Your Worship. How much of the water reserve would we be using to service the debt from the wastewater, leaving the water reserve with what amount? I don't want us to sit here tonight and approve something that takes all of their reserves, then they have an issue with something 4 years from now, and now we have to go lend the water department money because they've lent all of their money to the wastewater. I just want to make sure that the balance in between is some.
This is a plan, and like you say, there could be a situation, there could be an emergency where water does need the funds, and at that point in time, then you have the ability, because you have the financial flexibility, then you have the ability to issue debt. So the debt would be incurred in the wastewater operations to give it sufficient funds to pay back the water. So again, I think it would be a benefit to.
I realize there's always a way out, but how much money of the wastewater reserve would we be using?
I've got it. Less than. It'd be about the first year would be about $1.5 million for the first couple of years, and then it gradually decreases.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any more concerns or any more questions for Jim? Okay, so we have a mover, which was.
So once again, Jim, thank you
Oops.
very much for the presentation, and I have to say that though it's never been done in all the years that we've been around, it makes sense. So if somebody does want to move that we proceed with this and they get a seconder,
I think I have a mover and I have a seconder.
Yes, Councillor Myatt, you have moved by Councillor Vadabancourt, seconded by Councillor LaRose.
Thank you. Any more concerns or questions? All in favor, do we adopt this? Opposed? Pass. Thank you. Well, I think you can go to your motel and relax, Jim. Okay, item number 2, propose a 5-year preventive road maintenance plan, RDS-2019-06. Recommendation for action that the proposed 5-year preventive road maintenance plan be approved in principle. I don't know if you went through your minutes and looked at it. If you have any question, or a project or a manager from transportation is here. Councillor Vadabancourt.
Excuse me. Thank you, Councillor Mayotte. I thought it was an excellent report, really good analysis. I just didn't see the definitions of the terms, so I sent a quick email to the director just so that he could provide me some information with respect to what a hot mix asphalt treatment means and what an asphalt rejuvenation means from a practical standpoint, because it wasn't really clear in the information, and I thought that might be helpful for everybody to understand.
Thank you,
Ryan?
Mr. Chair. Through to Councillor Vadabancourt. A hot mix asphalt treatment would be the placement, compaction of asphalt. This can be done in a number of ways, either through the pulverization of the existing asphalt service, or the complete milling off of the existing surface and placement of new asphalt. So that's that treatment summary. For asphalt rejuvenation treatments, it's a treatment that we've been using since 2012, and it's gaining momentum in Ontario. It's been used for over 50 years in the United States, and it has just recently come over into Ontario. And what essentially it is, it's one of the lowest cost preventative treatments that is out there in the marketplace. And what it does, it's a spray-on treatment that actually changes the chemical properties of the surface of the asphalt. And it's reserved for asphalt sections that are still in good condition. And the idea of it is that it is meant to prevent the formation of cracks that happen in the asphalt surface through the oxidation of the asphalt. So by doing these treatments on a 5 to 6 year rotating basis, it prevents the surface cracking and the infiltration of water, which progresses the deterioration of the asphalt. So by keeping our asphalt pavements in good condition and spending the least amount of dollars, we're prolonging the life of these asphalt sections and lengthening the time between expensive rehabilitation treatments. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Do we have any more questions for Brian? Councillor Cummings?
Thank you, Worship. Through to the Director. Thompson's Road, I notice you have $75,000 in there. Are we not sharing still with Midland the maintenance agreement for that road?
Thompson's Road is entirely within the town
I'm
of
sorry,
Penetanguishene.
it was Murray Road. I've got that mistake, sorry.
Yep.
So we're okay, Councillor Cummings? Okay. Any more questions for Brian? Okay, can I have a mover to, whoops, sorry, Deputy Mayor?
One question in reference to, I believe it was Lorne Avenue, from Robert Street East right to where we dropped off last year? Is it going to go that far?
To Burke Street, Deputy Mayor. And if conditions, through to the Deputy Mayor, if budgetary permits within our $310,000 in our preventative asphalt maintenance budget, we'll extend it to Richelieu.
Yes, because last year we did do Payette and Lorne, and there was a section on Lorne Avenue that was not done, that's beyond Burke Street.
That's right.
So I'm sure there'll be some interest in having that section done as well, because it was pretty bad.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? Councillor Cummings?
Thanks. This time I got the street right. I notice there's rejuvenation for Church Street from Fox Street to Yeo, which was just done like 5 years ago, 4 years ago. What about the rest? Is there any plans to rejuvenate or to repave from Yeo Street to the mental health center? Because that hasn't been done in 50 years. And it's now, because the buses are now being able to go on there and trucks, it is just deteriorated so badly that there's a need for it.
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Cummings, it's not identified in our plan right now, Councillor Cummings, but we always leave a little bit of room in our budget for discretionary paving if the budget permits. We usually are conservative in our estimates for budget reasons, for that reason. And if there is an opportunity to do additional sections like I mentioned on Lorne Avenue or Church Street, there's always the opportunity to do that.
Thank you. The only reason I'm asking is because people are complaining along Church Street that their houses are now vibrating because the buses and the dump trucks are going in those potholes and actually literally vibrating things in their house. And there's cracks in their walls right now. So just wondering.
Sure. Yep.
Okay, do we have any more questions for Brian? Okay, can I have a mover for this? Okay, sorry. Councillor Vadeboncard, a seconder, Deputy Mayor Dubo. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, referral for upcoming agenda and staff. Referral that the Transportation Environment Service Section endorse the following additional and existing referral to the upcoming agenda and staff. Does anybody want to add anything to the referral? I guess the only one we've got is the Thompson Extension, which will be coming up. So can I have a mover for this? Councillor LaRose, seconder. Councillor Sanama, all in favor? No opposing, okay, pass. Question period from, I guess, just the media. My public's all gone. No question from the media? Your Worship, turning it back to you.
Thank you. And we will now move on to Section B7, Recreation Community Services, and I will turn it over to Councillor LaRose.
Thank you, Your Worship. 7A is our consent agenda. We have a recommendation that the following consent agenda items have been given due consideration and be received for information. Number 1 was Save On Energy retrofit program. We had 3 programs in there, 3 projects in there, I should say. Number 2 is the Sports Hall of Fame fee reduction request. And number 3 was our tourism exercise summary. So I need a mover for any one of those.
You're going to ask if anybody wants to pull.
Well, did we want any of them pulled? Yes.
Yes, I would like to pull number 2.
Which one would you like pulled?
Number 2.
Number 2. Okay. Anybody have any other ones they want? Deputy Mayor?
Just a friendly comment. It was great to understand through the Save on Energy retrofit, we saved $11,000.
That's
I
correct.
think that's awesome.
Very
Thank
good
you.
on the 3 projects that were just around
Absolutely.
town, yes.
Yep, thank you.
So can I have a mover for number 1 and number 3 then? And we'll deal with those. Councillor Sanama and seconded by Councillor Mayette. All in favor? And that's carried. So, Your Worship, back to you on number 2, Sports Hall of Fame fee reduction request.
Thank you, Councillor LaRose. The Sports Hall of Fame reduction request is actually looking for a reduction in the payment of the Brian Orser Hall and Kitchen in regards to a fundraiser being put on by the Sports Hall of Fame for Lorraine Lalonde. And as maybe all of you know or might know, that Lorraine suffered a very serious stroke a while back, spent quite a number of time convalescing at the Georgian Village. I understand that she is now home, and the reason for the fundraising is that she requires a lot of special equipment and able to live at home. What we're looking at in total for the hall rental, the kitchen, the setup, HST is $627.15. Now, whether or not many of you know or do not know, is that the Lalonde's ELM Catering have been doing our town dance for many, many years, and we also know that Larry Lalonde does a lot of beneficial work throughout the municipality, does a lot of favors for many people. Excuse me. And also, Larry is a board of directors on the Sports Hall of Fame. We have an agreement with the Sports Hall of Fame that they pay us $5,000 per year to do repairs to the Brian Orser Hall and Kitchen. So I would like to put a motion forward that we allow this reduction. Yes, Madam Clerk.
I've taken the liberty of preparing a motion for you, for committee's consideration.
Okay.
That the request from the Sports Hall of Fame to waive the fees for the event in honor of Lorraine Lalonde in the amount of $627.15 be approved.
And I would move that.
We're doing it through our section? The motion? Yes.
The motion is through
Okay,
through
so
you.
we
Yes.
have it moved by Your Worship and seconded by Councillor Sanama. All in favor? And that's carried. Just for your information, Councillor Sanama and I dealt with this at section on Monday. We had the exact same result as your spiel, so it's good to see that everybody was on board. Good people, good cause, and this one won't hurt us. So moving down for matters for consideration, we have none. Moving on to referrals, we have 3 items on there: our cycling strategy, our feasibility study, and our follow-up to our building condition assessment. Did anybody want to have any of those pulled or have any of those added on to? Seeing none, we'll go to question period from the media and public. It was Andrew, nothing.
Sorry, I just need a mover and seconder for those.
For those, yes. I need a mover. Councillor Sanama, seconded by Councillor Mayat. All in favor? Boom. Your worship, I believe that does it. It's back to you.
Thank you, Councillor LaRose. We will move on to 8, Section C, Planning and Community Development Services, and we'll pass it on to Deputy Mayor Dubo.
Thank you, Your Worship. Under the consent agenda, we have none. We have one item under matters for consideration. I will read the report and then ask for a mover and a seconder. That council waives the formal purchasing process per the town's procurement bylaw 2018-02 due to the good or service only available from a sole source in accordance with Section 21, and that the contract between Huronia Animal Control and the town of Penetanguishene be renewed for a period of 2 years, January 1, 2019 to December 31st, 2019, at a cost of $46,291.34, and January 1, 2020 to December 31st, 2020, at a cost of $46,754.25. And finally, that a bylaw and agreement be brought forward by for signatures by the mayor and clerk. I know this is a little unusual to sole source, and I know that that has been an issue in the past, but in this particular case, it's very clear that the Huronia Animal Control are doing a great job for us, and there aren't too many people in the area that are conducting this service. I know in speaking to our Director of Planning, there was a concern about succession planning, and I think that's something that in this 2 years that gives us an opportunity to talk about that. So hopefully I could answer some questions if there are concerns or questions from members of council. Yes, Councillor Cummings.
Just the question that has to be asked. Was there proposals sent out for other organizations?
No, there were not. This is sole sourcing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? So I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor LaRose, seconded by Councillor Sanama. All those in favor? Thank you. Carried. Referrals to upcoming agendas, that the Planning and Community Development Services section endorse the following addition and existing referrals to upcoming agendas and staff. We only have one, and it's local smoking and vaping bylaw. Are there any other items that need to be added? Yes, Councillor LaRose.
Just one, Madam Chair. I'm just wondering if at some point would planning be bringing forth their annual list of properties in which the municipality owns that we may be considering getting rid of or doing something with?
Very good point. I do believe that that is being undertaken. We are, perhaps the CAO or Andrea could speak to that.
I'll maybe give it a shot, and then I'll let the Director of Planning kick it off. I think there was a list that was brought a year ago or maybe even a couple of years ago, and I think there was some confusion around next steps with it. I think it was just received by council. So certainly at a staff level, we can talk about bringing that back. But if it's a request of committee to add that, then I would suggest we add it as a referral item. It's not typically something we bring every year, but we're happy to bring it. It's essentially ready. There might be some updates to be made, but certainly would be looking for some clear direction this time around from committee and council on next steps. So if it's the will of committee to add as a referral item, we certainly could bring that back.
I'm not so sure we need to add it as a referral item, but certainly it seems like it's of interest, so a report of some sort perhaps could come forward. Would that be satisfactory, Councillor LaRose?
That would be fine. I just wanted to make sure that, I just didn't remember seeing it and I believe it was a couple of years. So
Yeah.
just new crew, we need to have a look at what we have and possibly what we might be doing with them.
Well, and I think we all got an email recently. Sorry, we did get an email recently of a piece of property that's for sale. Just a small piece of property. Andrea?
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. I just did wish if to add it to referrals, and that's a good place for me to remember of that task. And just to give a little bit of clarity on exactly what you would like me to outline or detail in that report, I can give you just the inventory, which I think is what we brought forward last time, talking about these are the properties we have. These are the ones that I think I had ranked gold, silver, or bronze in terms of potential for development. I think I also recall from that meeting that there was some comments related about what is the impact, what's the financial impact or analysis of that report. So I think that's what Jeff was alluding to, and in the past we were a little unsure of what the next steps are. So I'd appreciate some direction on what exactly you'd like me to look at. If it's just the inventory, that's something that we can look at.
Thank you, Andrea. Councillor LaRose, is that what you're asking for?
Well, an inventory would be good. That would be one, but it would be nice to see what staff recommends through section as to, is there some pieces of property that we need to divest ourselves of? Is there some property that we need to acquire for a specific reason? Just that type of stuff. Just a general one. No hurry, no timeline, just as a reminder.
Okay, yes, Madam Clerk.
I think what we're hearing suggested from our Director of Planning is that if it is something that Council wants to see, it will be easily forgotten about if we don't place it on this referral item. Happy that it's not an urgent, I think probably an urgent report, but I did sort of go ahead and add it here if Council's comfortable with that. I've listed it as vacant municipal property inventory update. And I've listed the key deliverables as municipal property available for sale and development, staff recommendations to move forward with sale, staff recommendations for property to acquire. Is that what I heard?
Yes, thank you. Okay, we'll add that item. Now, I do have a mover and a seconder. No, not yet. So I need Councillor Santama and Councillor LaRose. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Question period from the media? None tonight, and we have no public, so Your Worship, it's back to you.
Thank you. And we move on to 9, Section D, Finance and Corporate Services, and pass it on to Councillor Vadeboncoeur.
Thank you, Worship. I believe we have a presentation scheduled for the commencement of this section. It's Elizabeth Hill, our consultant dealing with compensation. Yes, Madam Clerk.
Sorry, I should have been more clear in our quick conversation there. The presentation is scheduled to appear in that area where the report appears on the agenda. So it's really the last thing we're going to talk about during Finance and Corporate Services. So we can get through the majority and then maybe take a brief recess so I can get our consultant on the telephone, if that's okay.
Sounds good, Madam Clerk. Moving along on the agenda, we have one item on the consent agenda, and it is correspondence from the guest house shelter. We have a recommendation that the consent item, having been given due consideration, be received for information. Any questions or comments? Yes, Your Worship.
I would like to pull it. And I would probably ask our CAO to give us kind of an update on this whole matter.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, to His Worship's comment, there's a significant amount of history with this request from the guest house. The guest house made a request, and ultimately all 4 municipal councils signed on to provide a $25,000 loan from each municipality to the guest house shelter. Two of the municipalities provided that loan at with no interest, and 2 of the municipalities provided it with interest. We, as the town of Penetanguishene, did provide the loan with no interest payable. There were several requests to defer payment. There has been no payment made to date on that loan to any of the municipalities. The town of Midland did pass a motion back in the fall to essentially forgive the loan. That same request came to the town of Penetanguishene Council in the fall, and at the time, our council made the decision that the loan agreement was to stay in place and enforced. So I did reach out to the CEO, Stephen Peltier of the guest house shelter, had some conversation with him to say, listen, the loan is payable and due, and to start talking about a repayment plan. At that time, he informed me that he would be requesting a deferral of payment, but also requesting that it be extended over a 5-year term, which the letter in the agenda outlines. The request had gone to, the same request in the fall had gone to Tiny Township and Tay Township. I was informed just yesterday that Tay Township actually approved the forgiveness of the loan, and Tiny Township has not yet made a decision. Tiny did ask for additional information around fundraising activities, financial statements, the population and residents that they serve in North Simcoe, and some other information that was provided to Tiny just recently. So that's, in a kind of a quick nutshell, the history, and I appreciate that I'm providing this verbally, and there's a number of staff reports that have been provided to this council previously, but right now the direction we've received from council is to enforce the loan agreement as it stands, and in front of you this evening on the consent agenda is a request from the guest house, as I identified, to request that the repayment be extended over a 5-year term, with a deferral of the first payment being made essentially a year from now in January of 2020. So hopefully that provides the history, Your Worship, that you were looking for through you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So at this point, the recommendation is that the letter be received for information. Is there any further discussion on this? Okay, may I have a mover and a seconder then to receive this correspondence for information? Councillor Rose moves it, and Councillor Mayotte seconds it. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. The next item on the agenda is a verbal update from the Chief Administrative Officer on the Regional Government Review. Mr. CAO, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I apologize, this is listed as a verbal update. Timing with this has been fairly tight, but I'll try to give you a short, sweet, and succinct update in terms of the project that the ministry is undertaking. Attached in the agenda, you'll see a letter that was provided to each head of council on January 15th, which essentially was the announcement from Minister Clark that they are embarking upon this regional government review. In addition to that, we've also attached a printout from the ministry website that outlines the terms of reference as well as the scope of the project. It identifies the municipalities, and it also identifies 5 questions around municipal governance and decision-making. And in addition to that, it also lists 4 questions around municipal service delivery. More recently, at the end of January, each mayor within the county of Simcoe was provided some additional correspondence that they would be looking, the ministry advisors would be looking to meet with each mayor for 30 minutes as a consultation and meeting with each mayor individually, and that the mayors were allowed to bring one other person with them, and that other individual would be a staff person. There has been, coordinated through the county, there has been our meeting with the ministry is next Tuesday, February 19th at 2:30. The mayor has asked that I accompany him at that meeting, and it's a 30-minute session with one of the advisors, and in our case, it's Ken Sealing. It's not Michael Fenn, who's the other advisor, it's Ken Sealing. So essentially, we've placed it on this evening's agenda because the mayor believes that, and as do I, that this is really a conversation for committee and council as a whole, as opposed to just the mayor, but recognizing and respecting the ministry's request that the mayor is to convey that message from committee and council. We have a senior management team meeting tomorrow that we will also be discussing this at. In addition to later this week, the mayor and I will be meeting to try to pull everything together to finalize kind of what our approach is. Essentially, although there's 9 bullet points in that terms of reference document, the ministry has further condensed it, and really what they want to talk about, and they've provided some additional questions that I just received not very long ago, around, and they want to narrow it down to 3 things: municipal governance, municipal decision-making, and municipal service delivery, which essentially is what those bullet points capture, but in a little more depth. So at this point, Your Worship, from my perspective, at an administrative level, just looking for some feedback from committee of the whole that we can collectively take next Tuesday to the meeting, to our 30-minute meeting with one of the advisors.
Thank you, Mr. CAO. With respect to your meeting with His Worship, when was that scheduled again?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, the meeting with the ministry advisor?
No, just you and His Worship sitting down and having a conversation about your approach for next Tuesday.
I believe it's tomorrow, but it could be Friday. It's either tomorrow or Friday in advance of Tuesday's meeting.
Thank you. So perhaps I wait the committee's indulgence, but if committee wants to talk about it tonight, that's fine. But on the other hand, an option might be that if committee members have comments, they could forward them to yourself and the mayor, and perhaps those can be incorporated as part of your discussion whenever that meeting takes place later this week. Would that suffice in terms of giving an opportunity for members of council to review the material, and if they have any thoughts, they can just forward them to you two gentlemen?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, I'm certainly open to that. We thought we would get it on this evening's agenda in advance, if there was an anticipation or desire to have the conversation this evening, but I'm also open to, if members want additional time to give thoughts or consideration, that we could receive that by email. I just quickly looked. I think our meeting is tomorrow afternoon, and I see the mayor shaking his head yes. But in at the end of the day, if we get the feedback from members of committee or council, kind of by the end of this week, we can pull things together relatively quickly before our meeting on Tuesday.
Thank you. So what is the wish of members of council? Do you want to have a discussion this evening, or do you just want to think about it and provide your comments to His Worship and the CAO, Madam Deputy Mayor?
Well, I think we should have, I don't think we have to have an in-depth discussion, but I guess the question that I wanted to ask, I think we here in Penetanguishene have taken the initiative to do a lot of cost-sharing ventures, and would that be part of the discussion with, we've done a lot of things that I think we can list them, which would be positive, and also the governance portion. I know that a lot of us through this past election in the fall talked about reducing council to 7 members. Is that something that would also be brought forward? I know it's premature because we haven't had that report at the table here, but I just throw it out.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I believe that His Worship has some comments.
Yes, and I believe that what the Deputy Mayor is hinting at is it would certainly fall under the service delivery component of the three questions being asked, the service delivery, because when we actually look at it, we do cost share or have service delivery with quite a number of different municipalities in the area. For example, one of our biggest ones, Midland, is where we have fire, we have building, we have summer component of and then we have the one with Georgian Bay Township in HR, and we have winter maintenance, Brunel Side Road, where we exchange through the winter. So we have a lot of this that we can bring up to the chapter we're dealing with, and so under the service delivery we can certainly cover a good area. What were the other two questions, Mr. CAO, that we were going to be looking at?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the other two were municipal governance and municipal decision-making. So municipal governance, municipal decision-making, and municipal service delivery were the three areas that the advisors want to focus on next Tuesday in the 30-minute meeting.
Well, under those, one of those items, we know for sure that with the whole deal is that they're going to be looking for one thing in any kind of municipal deliveries. They're going to be looking for reduction in council. We're almost certain of that.
Mr. CAO, and then Councillor Cummings wants to make a point.
I'll just touch on, and I apologize if I didn't mention this, but the agenda item, the agenda that they've sent us, the item with respect to these three items identifies discussions on what works well and what can be improved in the areas of, and then it lists those three areas. So what works well and what can be improved in terms of municipal governance, municipal decision-making, and municipal service delivery.
Councillor Cummings.
Thank you. My only comment was this investigation or this survey that's going on is to look at county councils or regional governments. Are they effective? Is there a need for a two-tiered structure or three-tiered or whatever you have? Does the existing model work or not work? And how we as municipalities are handling our own affairs as far as governance is concerned. So I'm not sure they're looking at reduction in municipal staff. I think they're looking for a reduction of regional staff or regional councils.
Not reduction in municipal staff, reduction.
Or, sorry, municipal councils. They're looking at regional reductions.
Councillor Rose.
Thank you. I'm just wondering what information would we be bringing down to them? We would be bringing down the fire and the building department and on the bus system, all of those types of things. Would we be bringing any information to say that it is kind of a burden sometimes with the county, like through our planning department? We went through most of our planning stuff and we ramped it up to make it developer friendly. And as we all remember, we're being slowed down by the county wanted to review the plan, and the county said no to this and that through our planning process. So I would hope that when you guys go to see these people, that you bring forth examples like that would show that our governance is good, we're changing it quick, we're staying, with our stuff, our infrastructure's moving forward, all of the good things, and maybe just give them a couple of the bad things. Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments on this?
Okay, well, thank you. So again, as has been indicated earlier, if you have any further thoughts on this, if you want to forward them to His Worship and CAO, please, that would be appreciated. The only thing I wanted to mention was that from the standpoint in terms of this initial 30-minute meeting, that's what it is. It's just an initial 30-minute meeting. And there will be further opportunities for municipalities to provide input, as I understand, later through the process. So hopefully as a council or members of council will have that opportunity along with our staff to have a good discussion about what formal input the town may want to submit through this process. The timelines are tight, has been noted in terms of when the advisors are to submit the report and decisions, et cetera, but I think there's going to be an opportunity for members of council to have a discussion as a group with respect to this particular matter. Mr. CAO, anything further on this?
Not from me. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Okay, moving on then to the next item on the agenda, which is the Information Technology IT Service Agreement extension. We have a motion in the agenda that the Information Technology IT Service Agreement be extended to December 31st, 2020, and that the clerk bring forward the necessary bylaw for council approval. Are there any questions or comments on this particular item? Seeing none, may I have a mover for the motion I just read? Councillor Rose, a seconder. Councillor Sanama, all those in favor? Carried. Moving on to the next item on the agenda, we have the 2017 Surplus Analysis Update Report, and the recommendation is that council receive the financial contributions to community organizations policy for information and discussion, and that the following community capital requests be approved. So in your agenda were the two items that were left over from our last discussion. We had presentations this evening from the two groups. Maybe we'll deal with the first request, the community reach, $12,000, or sorry, I believe it was amended down to $9,000. Transportation linking communities for the purchase of a van. Does anybody have any comments on this particular one? Does anybody want to move it forward for consideration? I'll pause and see if there's any comments on this one. Councillor Rose?
We'll just do the comment portion, Mr. Chair. I remember when these folks came to us a year ago, we had taken the money, we had given them, I believe it was $12,000. To me, nobody else has really got on board with it. They haven't done a ton of fundraising. We're just over 25% of their pickup, so I would have hoped that the other three municipalities that they serve would have picked up their 25% each, and well, if it doesn't do Tiny and Tay, if it's only Midland, well, they're getting 75% of their pickups in Midland, and we would be forwarding 100% of their basic vehicles. So just on that surface alone, I would not be comfortable doing any more money.
Thank you, Councillor Rose. Any other comments on this? Deputy Mayor Dubel?
Well, I sort of agree with Councillor LaRose. We did give them the $12,000 just not even 6 months ago. Yeah, but it was, it's pretty soon. I would rather we put this aside for the moment, and perhaps they could come back to us in another year when they have more dollars towards this project, and perhaps from other sources. It is a great service. I know on a personal level, family members that are involved in picking up residents and delivering them, and very, very positive results. But I think we have other places that we need to park money. So at this particular time, I would say we set it aside.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Councilor Mayotte?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with Councilor Rose and the Deputy Mayor, because we're the only, well, two municipalities. They haven't contacted the others or haven't approached the others. I'd like to put this one and just leave it aside for now. Like, I'll be voting against this one.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Cummings, did you? I was gonna say that I tend to agree. It seems like a very worthwhile program. However, as we've just funded it, and it would appear that we would be paying for 100% of this new bus. I would only mention, though, to fellow members of council who had mentioned we'll set this aside. We're dealing with the 2017 surplus here, so if we could just turn it down, and then in the correspondence indicate that maybe turn it down at this point in time, and they're welcome to apply in fiscal 2020, so that we can close off this particular year, the 2017 year, if that's in agreement. So. Those are my comments. Councillor Cummings, did you have some comments?
Sorry. Yeah, I would tend to agree. I would prefer to set this aside and ask them to apply again. I'm not quite sure why the original request was for $12,000 and now they've come back to us for $9,000 if the van has not gone down in price. So I'm not quite sure where that came from. And some of the figures that I'm looking at are in dispute of the figures that we saw here tonight. So, yeah, I would say that maybe they need to do a little homework and provide probably another partner, at least.
So, my sense is that there's not the support for this one, so we don't need an action to add it. So we'll just carry on then to the second request, which was $12,000 for the Huronia Transition Homes, Operation Grow. And this was, again, a second request. Council had provided $12,000 in 2018, and this was a second request. So any comments on this particular request? Councillor Rose?
We'll go again. It's the same basic thing, a very good thing in the community, just like the last one was. But from what I've seen tonight in their presentation, they indicated that the $12,000 that we gave them last year completely outfitted them with everything they needed. The basic thing they only needed was a great big kitchen table. $12,000 would more than buy that. The other people weren't really coming forth, so I would suggest I would be on the same side as the one before. No thanks for this year, and we'll just leave it at that.
Any other comments? Thank you. I share Councillor Rose's comments on that. The only other thing I would add is that it didn't appear that there were any other contributions coming forward. So I would support that. So if with the concurrence of committee then or section, we'll just leave that aside as well. So going to the last item was with respect to the policy, and were there any comments or any discussion anybody wants to have on the financial contributions to community organizations policy? It was provided for information discussion. Anything anybody wants to discuss about the policy? Okay, seeing none, then I'll reread the motion, and then I'll look for a mover and seconder. That council receive the financial contributions to community organizations policy for information and discussion. And Madam Clerk, I think we'll leave the last paragraph off, so it'll just be that paragraph. So may I have a motion? May I have a motion for Mr. CAO? I see your hand waving there. So
through you, Mr. Chair. Sorry. If there's no information or discussion on the policy, staff can take away. But I think the last conversation that we had at the last meeting was that staff would present this policy And if we want the policy to stay as, and if that's what I'm hearing from committee, then staff will provide no additional further action. But if there's some suggested changes, or if committee wants staff to go away and make some suggested changes based on our own thoughts, I guess just looking for some clarity, are we returning with staff's recommended changes, or are we just leaving status quo and leaving it as is?
If I may, section, I'll just ask the CAO, is it due for an update, and are there either areas that staff feel need to be updated? If that's the case, then by all means, carry on, do the review and bring something forward.
Through you, Mr. Chair, it was last approved by council 7 years ago, so it's probably due for a revamp and an update. Staff are happy to go away and provide our own feedback and own suggestions, but if there's anything burning in even committee members' minds that would help, we would certainly welcome that at a staff level. And if there's not, then we will go away and come back with some staff suggested changes.
Thank you. Councillor Cummings.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe that the treasurer brought a point up at our last meeting that we tend to be straying away from that policy, and that it may be a time that we looked at it, and whether we leave it or whether we change it would be something that we'd look at, because I believe there's a phrase in there that says that charitable organizations belong in the ratepayers' hands and not through taxation or through any other funds. So that was the only thing I was concerned about in this policy.
Thank you. Councillor Clue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Reviewing the policy, I don't think there's too much that I would change, but I think maybe it might be a question of implementation. If there isn't an application form that goes along with it, that might help to clarify things for the organizations in the area.
Thank you. Councillor Rose.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was having some computer problems during the week, so I didn't really get a chance to read all of these. Some worked, some didn't. Just looking through this one now, it says that we will not do any multi-year commitments. And we have done that, just lately. And it said we will not do any funding outside of our geographical area. So we would kind of need a definition. What is our geographical area? If it's the town limits, the people that were here tonight are out of the game. If it's a multi-year one, we just agreed to do to the hospital, I believe it was. We just finished. None of them would be in the policies. So, yeah, maybe we could just have a revamp of the policy sometime before next year's budget.
Thank you, Councillor. The only thing that struck me was with respect to the grants being funded from the previous year's surplus. Oops, I thought that we might want to give some consideration as an option to, if we're going to do this, to do it and budget for it, as opposed to relying on the surplus. There must have been reasons back 7 years ago that council took this particular course, and those reasons may still be valid today. But on the other hand, maybe another approach is worth considering as well. So that was my comment, and the other comments that thoughts I had have already been covered. So, Madam Clerk, hearing what we've just heard, then we may need to modify that motion somewhat.
I think that probably the cleanest way to do this would be to move the motion as you originally suggested, that it be received for information and discussion, and then if council does want to see our treasurer put forward recommendations for changes, that just be added to the referral item again, just so it doesn't get lost in the shuffle.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. With respect to the comments that were made about the two grant requests that we heard earlier this evening about not this year, but they're welcome to submit in the future, do you need a motion to that effect, or is just direction sufficient and the correspondence can reflect that?
I believe that the direction is sufficient verbally. It doesn't need to be requested in the motion.
Thank you. So having heard the question then, may I have a mover for the question? Councillor Rose, and a seconder. Councillor Sanama. So basically, Councillor Rose moved it, Councillor Sanama seconded it, that council receive the financial contributions community organization policy for information and discussion. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. So the next item on the agenda is the respect in workplace policy. So the recommendation is that the staff report regarding the respect in workplace policy be received, and that the respect in workplace policy be approved as presented. Any discussion on this recommendation? Seeing none, may I have a mover? Councillor Cummings, may I have a seconder? Councillor Sanama. Any further comments? All those in favor? Carried. Next item is the administration of policies and procedures policy. The recommendation is that the staff report regarding administration of policies and procedures be received, and that the administration of policies and procedures policy be approved as presented. Any discussion? Seeing none, I just had one comment. I just wanted to commend the CAO for bringing this forward. We did talk about this at section, and it's an innovative policy. It's something that other municipalities have adopted, and the CAO has brought it here to Penetanguishene, and I think it's well done. So I commend the CAO on this. Any other comments? We have a mover, Madam Deputy Mayor, a seconder, Councillor Sanama. Any further comment? All those in favor? Carried. Next item is item 6, service delivery review roadmap, and the recommendation is that council approve the attached service delivery review roadmap, and that staff proceed with the processes as outlined within this report. Mr. CAO, did you want to speak to this item at all before we get into discussion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess the only thing I would add is that the timing that we've identified on the roadmap in terms of short, medium, and long term is with respect to when staff would return back to committee with a deeper dive into each of these respective opportunities, recognizing that should committee and ultimately council wish to implement or proceed in one way, shape, or form, that the implementation could take and will take additional time. So although we've identified opportunity number 5 as an example as short term, so meaning a 2019 item, and I'm just picking that one, and maybe that's not a good example, but the opportunity may need additional time, which we would outline in a staff report to actually implement and go live as per se. So that's the only thing that perhaps I wasn't clear on in the report, but I wanted to clarify for committee.
Any comments, questions on this item? Councillor Rose.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one comment. I'm just wondering whether it wouldn't be prudent on staff's part to bring these forward to us with a little bit of notice, like 2 weeks or a month notice of when the implementation is going to be looked at. Just if there's any tweaks or any changes that council wants to see, that would be an appropriate time for us to get our say.
Thank you. Or thank you, Councillor. Is that something that staff could assist with?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm a little bit confused, and I apologize. Any of the items that have identified council beside them will come to committee and ultimately through council with a report and with options, and then committee and council will make a decision one way or the other, and we will identify it in that report what the implementation looks like. So does that help answer the question? There are some that are administrative and operational in nature, and then there's certainly some that are governance and strategic and really under the guise and responsibility of council. So I think if I'm hearing the question properly or correctly, the committee, anything that has council beside them will certainly come to committee and through council, and will be provided the full details, and council will have an opportunity to make a decision one way or the other, because it could affect service levels, it could affect services we provide, it could have budgetary impacts, etc. And then council ultimately will be the decision maker in terms of how we proceed, and we will identify from a staff perspective what that implementation looks like. So hopefully that addresses the question.
I think if I understood Councillor Rose, it was if an item's coming forward to council for consideration, that council be advised a couple of weeks ahead of time, rather than open the agenda on Friday or over the weekend and see that the item is on the agenda for the coming week. He was suggesting that perhaps, given the magnitude of some of these decisions that council will be making, is that they'd like to have a little more heads up that the item is coming forward, so that they can give it careful consideration, as opposed to just the time frame between when they get the agenda and when the council meeting actually takes place.
Yeah, through Mr. Chair, that's definitely feasible. In advance of publishing the committee agenda, we can certainly give committee heads up when the items are coming, and in addition to the notice that's provided when we publish the agenda.
Thank you, Councillor. Is that good? Okay. Any other questions on this particular item? So I read the motion. I'll just look for a mover and a seconder on this motion. Councillor Clue moves it. Councillor Rose seconds it. Any further comment? All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. The next item is the post-2018 municipal election accessibility report, pertaining to Section 12(2) of the Municipal Elections Act, and the recommendation is that the Council of the Town of Penetanguishene receives this report in accordance with the Municipal Elections Act, and that the said report be posted on the town's website and be made available to the public at Town Hall. Any discussion on this particular item? Seeing none, I'll look for a mover. Councillor Cummings, a seconder. Councillor Mayotte. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you, Madam Clerk, for the report. And the next item is, as I was informed, this is the where we want the presentation. Is that correct? So, Madam Clerk, would you like us to recess for 5 minutes so that you get everything set up, or how
Yes,
do you
if
want
I could respectfully request a brief recess. I'm going to, our consultant, due to the weather, is unable to attend this meeting, and so we're going to attempt a presentation via conference call. We're going to get the presentation up on the screen. Our Director of Human Resources is going to sort of go through the presentation, and we're going to have our consultant speak on the phone over the microphone system, and hoping for the best.
Excuse me, Madam Clerk, just is the consultant to be available for the closed session as well?
Yes, our plan, again, this just was discovered today that she wasn't able to make it due to the weather. The plan is that when we go into closed session, we would actually recess into the committee room to allow staff to get this room ready for use for tomorrow, and we would actually call the consultant to continue the discussion in closed session.
Okay, so Councillor Cummings just suggested, I see Councillor Moret standing up there. He just suggested that perhaps we deal with the referrals to upcoming agenda and staff first, and then we deal with the presentation, and then we have the discussion, and then we can wrap up the open session of the meeting and move right into closed. Does that help?
No, I don't think it's necessary, only because the closed session portion is actually a separate meeting. So we need to sort of do this presentation, do the referrals to the agenda, close this session, and then move into this, would be the special council meeting. So it's fine.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Councillor Sanama?
I'm just looking at the hour. Is this something that we want to tackle? Is it possible to defer this to another evening? Just asking.
It's a very good question. I'll pose that question to Mr. CAO. Did you hear the question that Councillor Sanama requested? She's just, did you hear the question?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I did hear the question.
Okay.
Certainly from a staff perspective, this was brought in the fall. I mean, it's entirely up to committee, whatever committee wishes to do. From my perspective, it was brought in the fall to committee, and committee at that time deferred it to the new year. We were hoping to have this brought 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago, I guess, at our last meeting, and we had a few touches to place on it, a few final touches to place on it. From my perspective, I'd like to see it, if committee is willing to tackle it this evening, addressed tonight, but it's entirely up to committee. I was hopeful, and certainly from a staff perspective, staff see that it's on the agenda and eagerly await the conclusion or the kind of the next steps. But if it's committee's will to defer it a month, then I can certainly convey that to staff as well. I think we're just looking, it's been a long time coming, so from my perspective, the sooner this can be dealt with by committee or council, the better. But I'll leave it in committee and council's hands.
Thank you. What's the will of committee? Do you want to keep going? Councillor Cummings?
I was just going to say that we have a meeting next week anyway. That's not hopefully going to last long. Perhaps we could do it next week.
Just, Mr. Chair, I have a couple other little thoughts.
Sorry.
We've teed up the consultant for tonight. If it's the will to tackle it next Wednesday night, I guess it is, we'll need to confirm that the consultant's available, so that may or may not be the case. The other thing that the clerk just mentioned is we do have 2 other items on the in-camera agenda as well this evening that we need to deal with. So this isn't the kind of the final item to deal with. So I'll just toss that out for committee and council consideration.
Thank you. Madam Deputy Mayor?
Can we do this in an hour? I mean, it's a very important issue, and I recognize that we've put this off before. We used to have council meetings till 11 and after. We've been spoiled, I suppose, in these last years not to have long council meetings, but if we can give it an hour, I'd be willing to stick with things and move forward.
Thank you. Councillor Rose?
Thank you. Just one comment. It's a little different. It's not that it was put off. It was deferred because there was a change of council. This happens every 4 years when this topic comes up. So it's not anything new. I think the only problem is that some councillors are probably having is that we've had, I don't know, 4 deputations already tonight. Are we really going to have our hearts and minds into this at this time of night, and everybody's checking the weather, and is it going to be, is staff getting, everybody had enough? You know, if we want to try it, but my suggestion would be is that it would just end up being rushed. I don't believe that there would be a good consensus in a short period of time.
Thank you, Councillor. Your Worship?
Thank you. Mr. CAO, next Wednesday, we were dealing with this budget item. Did we have anything else on that agenda?
Through you, Mr. Chair, at 6 o'clock, staff are holding an open house for the committee consultation piece from 6 till 7. At 7 o'clock, we have the budget meeting, and to my knowledge, that's the only meeting, that's the only item that we would have at 7 o'clock. Again, I just come back to, I don't know that the consultant's available next Wednesday night. We would need to engage. I see the director has her hand up, so she may have a response to that.
I do. Through you, Mr. Chair. The consultant has indicated she can be available by phone next week. She would be available in person in 2 weeks, and I indicated that there wasn't a meeting available then, so.
So if, from a procedural standpoint, then if we're going to defer this, I need a motion to defer, and we can defer it to next week. So if that's the will of committee, then we can do that. So it does not appear that other than, you know, from a standpoint in terms of the consultant's available, so we can deal with that. Is that sorry? Madam Deputy Mayor?
Are we deferring just this item, and we're still going to have our in-camera to deal with the other issues that need to be dealt with? Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So it would be the public portion of this item and the in-camera portion of this item would be deferred for 1 week to next Wednesday, February 20th, to be considered. And Councillor Cummings is moving that, and Councillor Sanama is seconding it. Any further discussion on that? All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. And so dealing with the referrals, we have a number of referrals that the Finance and Corporate Services section endorsed the following additional and existing referrals to upcoming agendas and staff: the Huroney Airport Commission, Joint Business Operational Review, Election 2018, reporting on items as required regarding the 2018 municipal election. Madam Clerk, are we completed that now?
Sorry, actually, just to interrupt you, there's no requirement for committee to actually read the items that are on. It's just more of a matter of we take the items, we say, is there anything additional or anything to be removed, and it just sort of speeds it up, just to help you. But the item specifically you were related to was the election item. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
And no, you do have more election reports coming your way.
Thank you. Are there any items to remove from this list? And any items to add? We did have one item that we discussed earlier, Madam Clerk, and that was...
It's actually already on the referral items list, community contributions policy review. So we just won't remove it.
Okay. Any other items to add to the list? Okay. So you heard the motion. May I have a mover for the motion? Councillor Minot, the seconder. Councillor Rose. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. And our media has left. There's no public here, so Your Worship, I'll turn the meeting back to you.
Thank you, and I will call for an adjournment. Councillor Cummings, thank you. All in favor? Okay. So we will now move on to special council meeting Wednesday, February 13th, and a call to order. If you have a declaration of pecuniary interest, declare now or at a given time. 3, approval of the agenda. Special council agenda, February 13, 2029, that the agenda of the special council meeting of February 13, 2029 be approved as presented. Mover, Councillor Wedebacher, seconder, Deputy Mayor Dubo, all in favor. So 4 in-camera items. Convene in closed session that in accordance with the Town of Penetanguishene Procedural Bylaw 2017-86, the Council of the Town of Penetanguishene move into an in-camera session to discuss personnel matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, labor relations or employee negotiations, litigation or potential litigation affecting the municipality or local board, including matters before administrative tribunals, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. And so we will not deal with pay equity.
Sorry, Your Worship, just to clarify, the reasons for going into camera will be slightly shifted just because we are removing that one item of the pay equity and compensation review. So we can, I just want to make sure Council is clear and concise on the reasons why we're going into closed session. So that would continue to be the litigation or potential litigation affecting municipality or local board, as well as advice that's subject to solicitor-client privilege.
Now,
Yes, but I'm going to go to
would we also be dealing with?
But the other items are related to the service delivery review roadmap,
Yeah.
where it comes to identifiable individuals as well as labor relations negotiations. But on the agenda, it does point to the items that it's identified to, and I just wanted to make sure that council's aware that those, that's why those are on there.
Good. Are we going to, Madam Clerk, we're able to hold our closed session here in chambers? We are able to hold our closed session here in chambers?
Yes, I mean, we're not going to have the consultant call in, so we do have one solicitor calling in, so we can, I think we can go to the other conference call. We're going to call them, and that's fine. Brian has that number. So we will just quickly get everything online here through our conference machine, if that's okay.
Very good. Okay, council. We have a motion that council of the town of Penetanguishene rise from in-camera session with a report. We have a mover, Councillor Sainama and Councillor Budimokar, all in favor. Okay, then we will get into motions. So the first one I have is that council approve the minutes of settlement for the litigation concerning the Philip H. Jones Pollution Control Plant Upgrade Project, and that staff proceed with the modeling of the grit removal system in conjunction with Grover Hill as outlined in the minutes of settlement. And I will move that, and seconder, Councillor LaRose. All in favor? That's carried. And Madam Clerk, you have another motion there?
Yes, Your Worship, thank you. The motion related to the service delivery roadmap reads that council approve the attached service delivery review roadmap and that staff proceed with bringing forward information reports for items number 19 and 20 to Committee of the Whole.
Mover, Councillor Rose, seconder, Councillor Sainama, all in favor? Carried. Question period from media and public, all gone. Move to adjourn. Councillor Mayette, and seconded by Deputy Mayor Dubois. All in favor?